This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We're not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the management. This podcast may contain adult themes, so parental discretion is advised. Today on the Modern Titus 2 Women Unplugged podcast, we welcome a woman whose journey is resilient, is remarkable. In 2015, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and quickly found herself relying on two canes, yes, two canes to walk. But through faith, determination, and unwavering spirit, she turned her pain into purpose, ultimately completing a half marathon and reclaiming her life. So Mo's story reminds us that while struggle may knock us down, hope gives us the strength to rise again. So Mo, you want to just introduce yourself to our listeners and just give them a brief overview of who you are and, what your journey has been so far.
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Mo. I am a mother of two kids. Um, I have gone through a lot and have come to a place where I got my life back. And I'm doing my best to give back to others.
Right.
I'm a business owner, so I help other business owners that are moms to organize the back end of their business. And I find a lot of joy in doing that. But primarily I'm a mom.
The best job in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did your world look like before you had MS? Just give us an idea of, what it was like before all of this started.
Yeah, so I was 20 years old. So I was living in a dorm or an apartment off at college with five other girls. I was working part-time in the school bookstore, and I was going to school full-time. And I was a functional, happy, normal college student.
Mm. Wow. And what happened? It did you have a fall? Did how did it manifest itself or, let you realize that something wasn't right with your body? What happened there?
Yeah, so I woke up one morning and half of my body was numb and tingly. And I just thought, oh, it's a pinched nerve, it'll go away. 2 weeks later, I realized it wasn't going away. And so I went to a doctor, and she basically said, let's do an MRI to rule out the serious stuff, and then we'll move forward from there.
Mhm.
And so I got that MRI, and within a few days, she called me and said, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is that we know what's wrong. The bad news is that you have over 20 lesions in your brain and you have
Whoa.
multiple sclerosis. So lesions are the scars in the
Mm,
brain, for those who aren't familiar.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that was the moment.
So, what really went through your mind when you got that diagnosis? Because I mean, from tingling, you know, I'm sure you didn't expect anything like that. So, what was going through your
No.
mind?
So I was studying a health-related thing in college. And so
Mhm.
I had heard of multiple sclerosis before, but I didn't know much about it. And so she said that, and I was like, what does that even mean? I was kind of in shock and disbelief because I didn't really understand.
Right.
And I called my mom after. She's a nurse and has worked with really severely disabled MS patients. And I told her the diagnosis, and she was shocked and dismayed. I think essentially my life flashed before her eyes.
Yes, because that is something that she's dealing with on a daily basis. So she
Hmm.
knows the magnitude of, and seriousness of it all.
Yeah.
So when you got the diagnosis and you continued, did you continue in college, or did what happened in regard to your career or anything like that? What did you have to change anything?
Um, yeah, so I'll just take it one step at a time because it's a kind of a
Mm-hmm.
big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was dating someone at the time, and I just kept going to school. I was put on a medication. I After just a couple weeks, I got engaged to this person, and but I had severe fatigue and the symptoms weren't going away. They were just morphing into more things. And so, because I was engaged, I moved home with my parents because that was where that boy was from. Um, and so I was planning on transferring colleges at that point. But then that boy and I broke up. So I was like, oh, I'll go back to that other college. So I moved back, and then within 3 weeks, I woke up one day and I had the mentality of a special needs girl, and I had a British accent. It's called foreign language syndrome, because the nerves in my face were affected. Uh, and I was walking with two canes at that point, and I still had my job, so I walked 1 mile to my job in that condition, and I was unaware that anything was wrong except for having an accent. I was like, oh, this is weird. Um, but I got to work and I was making a whole bunch of mistakes that I didn't normally make, and people asked me where I was from because I had this British accent, and I was like, oh, I'm from Utah. And they were just so surprised. And I found out later that my mom actually received an email from my boss. So my boss had a mother with multiple sclerosis, and so she knew what it looked like. So she emailed my mom and she said, something's wrong. Your daughter came into work looking disheveled. She's acting strange. And so my boss ended up sending me home, and then my brothers came over to check on me. And then from that point, my parents took me home, and I was home for the next year. Um, I stayed in that mental space for about a month, which I don't really remember that month, except for flashes of things like putting a glass in the sink too hard and it shattered, or like closing cupboards really hard, or being in a bed, just small snippets. And then my medication got switched, and people prayed for me a lot. And then I started to get better. And so this was fall of 2015, and it took until October for me to no longer need the canes. And then it took the rest of that year, and then I actually started working a job at the end of that year, and I started trying to get into shape because I had been put on steroids, which is to decrease the inflammation in your brain, but one of the side effects is gaining weight. And so I gained 40 to 60 pounds because I got a lot of steroid infusions. So anyways, when I started feeling better, I I felt pretty hopeless because my body wasn't working yet. but I was mentally present. And I felt like I had no meaning or purpose to my life, and I didn't know why I was given the opportunity to continue living, basically. And I prayed a lot and finally had a realization that as long as I am helping other people, even if I'm helping other people by letting them help me, then my life has meaning. And that gave me hope and started the fire in my belly, and I started to actually put an effort to get better. And then, so after was at home for like 7 months, I went back to school and I did school part-time and I worked a job part-time. And I was able to manage that level. Um, and so I did end up graduating. I ended up finding the love of my life and got married. We have two beautiful children. Yeah.
So, tell us about the faith journey because I got the impression that yes, you believed,
Hmm.
but this journey it cemented. It gave you a new view of what faith had to be in your life. So you
Yeah.
want to expound on that a little bit for our listeners to know how faith motivated you or, you know, got you back on the road to recovery.
Yeah. So when I was at my sickest point, there were hundreds of people praying for me and fasting for me. My name got sent to the Vatican, and people there prayed for me. Um, Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints put my name in their temples, and people prayed for me there. Like, there was a whole community of faith
There you go.
directed towards
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely believe that that is why I was able to recover. Like the doctors were surprised how well the medication was working. Like not only did I start to improve, but they saw the scars in my brain shrinking, which is like very uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yes.
completely give credit to God and faith and miracles.
Absolutely. That definitely sounds like a divine intervention.
Yeah.
But more so when we tell us about the marathon, the half marathon from
Yeah.
I mean from walking with two canes to running a half marathon. Tell our listeners about that journey.
So I've always been a runner and loved running. And getting an MS diagnosis was depressing on the
Mm-hmm.
one hand. I had actually signed up for a marathon and had been training for that when I got my diagnosis. And I was so unwell, I canceled my whatever membership, my, yeah. But I was still running. Like that, I had runs where I was holding on to my brother's arm and he ran with me and we just ran like around
Wow.
a couple blocks and
Mhm.
like my family was very supportive of my love and desire to keep running. And when I was walking with two canes, it was devastating because I honestly like didn't know if I was going to be able to walk on my own, let alone run. And so I remember the day that I ran around the front yard of my parents' house without a cane, without holding on to anyone. And I remember crying because I was so happy
Wow.
and
Tears of joy.
tears of joy. And I knew then that I didn't have to give up my goals just because I now had this big looming disease. And I'd always wanted to run a half marathon. So I signed up for one and I had to take extremely small steps
Right.
to get there. So, because when you hear going from 2Ks to a half marathon, everyone's like, "Whoa, that's amazing." But in the day to day, it's really quite boring. Like I ran to my neighbor's mailbox and back, and then the next day to the neighbor next to them and back. Like very small increments of time. And so really what I want everyone to learn from this is that you truly can do anything. It's just going to take small, sometimes mundane, daily steps that build on each other to get you to that point of whatever your dream is.
It's to get to, they always say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So just keep on stepping,
Hmm.
eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so what message of hope and resilience would you share with someone who's newly diagnosed with MS?
Well, first of all, medical things are advancing.
Mm-hmm.
Like being diagnosed with MS today is totally different from being diagnosed 10 years ago and totally different from 10 years before that. Like there's no longer that guarantee that if you get this diagnosis, you're going to end up in a wheelchair. Like that is no longer a thing. It happens to some people. But what I really want to say to them is that just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's the end. Like I've learned that I have to adapt. So
Right.
like if I want to take my kids to the park, I
Mm-hmm.
make sure I'm wearing a fan and I have
All the
somewhere that I
heat.
can sit down.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that I always make sure I take a water bottle. And ideally, I have someone else with me that can play on the playground with the kids so I can sit down. Like there are things you can do to still live the life you want to. You just have to be okay adapting and not doing it the way you've always done it.
Right. Right. So you speak to women, you have you have a podcast or you have a business that align with women who have MS. I'm not clear on that.
So I don't currently have a platform where I'm speaking directly to women with MS.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 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 no. I have a website, a blog.
Right. I remember. Yes, I remember saw
Thank you.
some. Yeah.
Yes. I have a blog where I've written a lot about my experience and different topics for women with MS. Yeah.
You're right. And how can someone get in touch with you if they want to speak to you or you know they're going through their journey and they just want to reach out to somebody who has walked in that shoe. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I don't know what your plan is, but we could always put a link to my Facebook
Yeah,
or
I can put the link there in
a
in in
place for them
in
to message
Spotify.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
cool.
All right. So that's okay. We can do that. All right. So as you continue to grow and overcome your challenges, what legacy do you hope your journey leaves for others who struggle with this chronic disease?
I hope that it will give them hope because it's so easy to focus on how much of a dead end getting a diagnosis is. If because you have to mourn and grieve the life that you always imagined for yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's healthy and good.
Mhm.
But there's a point where you need to choose to have hope and take that one step, like we were
Right.
talking about.
Yeah. Right. 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 Right.
Yeah.
That's so true. So, your story reminds us that resilience isn't just about avoiding the storm. It's about learning to dance through the storm, these storms that we have in our life. Your courage, faith, and determination has not only transformed your own life, but, you're a light in the path for so many others navigating their own challenge. So thank you so much for sharing with us on Modern Titus Two Women, and we look forward to hearing about the other chapter in the journey of life.
Thank you for having me.
It's been my pleasure, and it's been an honor because as I said before, I have persons in my family that is going through your journey, so I understand.
Yeah.